Page 1. Rethinking Human Evolution, by Jeffrey H. Schwartz, 2017. Chapter 1. The Deceptive Search for Missing Links in Human Evolution, 1868-2010. Do paleoanthropologists always work in the best interests of their discipline? Richard G. Delisle. Introduction. A key question underlying this paper is, do those paleoanthropologists who discover and pronounce upon fossils follow good and sound scientific practices that are in the best interests of their field? To quote White, 2000, 289, modern paleoanthropology is like an inverted ecological pyramid. Armchair commentators abound. Actual producers of fossil data are increasingly rare. Because, more broadly, this is often the case in science, historians of science tend to focus on the discoverers, since they are initially responsible for enlarging knowledge through the addition of novel empirical evidence. However, as Thomas Kuhn convincingly presented in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, 1970, historians of science have become increasingly aware of the sociological fact that new discoveries are not introduced into an intellectual vacuum. Rather, discoverers present their discoveries to an opinionated scientific community that then evaluates them in the context of received wisdom. In order for it to be recognized as legitimate, a new empirical fact, or conceptual breakthrough, must ultimately be accepted by a sufficient number of scholars within a particular area. Although not always immediately appreciated by its presumed practitioners, the production of scientific knowledge is organized around a complex intellectual interplay that relies on scholars who attempt to introduce new components, and those who evaluate, analyze, synthesize, and interpret new data on their own as well as in the context of past knowledge. On this view, as much as we may be grateful to fossil-discovering paleoanthropologists for raising money, organizing expeditions, and perhaps finding new fossils and contingent information, for example, environment and its exploitation, history reveals an alarming adherence to debatable scientific practice, such as claiming discovery of a missing link, or, more specifically, the ancestor of a known species, its disputable identification notwithstanding, or of a specific hominid clade. Here, as a historian of science, I assume the role not only of commentator of paleoanthropological practice, but as agent provocateur of those who also comment on this discipline. This paper is directed at both its producers and commentators. But before continuing, it is necessary to make clear that, 1. This contribution does not espouse or reject any particular perspective on human evolution. 2. Mention of practicing paleoanthropologists, past or present, is not intended to be a statement on scientific misconduct, that is, mention of individual perspectives serves only to illustrate what appears to be collective practice in the field, and, 3. The review presented here is offered as an invitation to practicing paleoanthropologists to reflect on their procedures. While it is legitimate for a historian to extend such an invitation, he or she must stop at the threshold of the practice itself, and thus maintain distance between the historian of the discipline and its scientists. Missing links, a historical overview beginning in the late 19th century. The following discoveries, which were originally claimed to be missing links, will drive home the point made previously. 1891–1892, Java, Pithecanthropus erectus. Eugene Du Bois conceived that living hominoids, including humans, emerged from a hypothetical tertiary gibbon-like form called prothalobates. The human lineage had gone through a Pithecanthropus stage that gave rise to Homo sapiens. Du Bois 1894, 1896a, 1896b. Since the fossil material underlying this claim was limited to a skullcap, femur, and molar with questionable association, Du Bois' claim was subject to heated debate, see Thunen 1989, 53a 108. 1880s and 1900s, Argentina, Tetraprodhomo argentinus, Diprothomo platensis, Homo pamius, and Homo pliocenosus. According to Florentino Amgano, 1906, 1907, 1909, all of these Miocene and Pliocene forms led either directly or tangentially to the emergence of living humans. Nevertheless, few scholars embraced Amgano's claims, especially after demonstration of the fossil's recency. See in 8 copyright Spaffy and Torres 1997. 1908–1912, England, Anthropist Aussoni, Piltdown. Following the original description of the discovery by Charles Dawson and A. Smith Woodward, Dawson and Smith Woodward 1912, Smith Woodward 1913, Grafton Elliott Smith, 1912, 1913, 1924, became associated with the discovery through his reconstruction of the skull. In keeping with his belief that human evolution was tied to evolution of the brain, Smith supplanted Homo neanderthalensis and Homo heidelbergensis with the Piltdown hominid as the basal species and the lineage of genus Homo. Beginning with the application of fluorine analysis to the Piltdown bones, this hominid had been shown without doubt to be a fake, a composite of cranial bones and a lower canine of a recent human with the mandible of a recent orangutan. See Spencer 1990. 1924, South Africa, Australopithecus africanus. Raymond Dart, 1925, 1926, 1929, was steadfast in presenting the tongue-child skull as a taxon intermediate between apes and extant humans. Nevertheless, the juvenility of this specimen has led to debate concerning its taxonomic, and also phylogenetic, status. See Delisle 2007, 222-8-231. 1932, Kenya, Homo canamensis. Louis Leakey, 1934, 207, considered a mandibular fragment proof that the roots of modern Homo sapiens lay in the very early Pleistocene. Unfortunately, Leakey lost geographical and geological data concerning this specimen. See Morrill 1995, Chapter 5. 1958, Italy, Oreopithecus bambilii. Although first known only from dentognathic specimens, the recovery of a nearly complete skeleton provoked Johannes Hertzler, 1958, 1960, to argue that this Miocene hominoid, with its relatively small canines, orthognathic face, and apparent bipedality, was more central to human evolution than the more ape-like East African proconsul and European Dryopithecines. 1959, Tanzania, Zinjanthropus boii. Found by Mary Leakey in Upper Bedai, Olduvai Gorge, Louis Leakey, 1959, 1960, 1961a, argued that this very robust lower Pleistocene Australopith, and not other Australopiths, was basal to the human lineage, which was a view difficult to defend in light of his own claim that the divergence of human and Australopith lineages had been quite early. See Lewin 1987, 137a-141. 1960a-1963, Tanzania, Homo habilis. The discovery of gracile specimens of early Pleistocene hominid at Olduvai Gorge that Leakey and colleagues, 1964, allocated to the new species Homo habilis served to demonstrate that Zinjanthropus was not the basal ancestor of Homo, and that human and Australopith lineages had long been separated. Although Leakey and colleagues thought their H. habilis the ancestor of all Homo, they may not have seen it as a direct ancestor of H. erectus, see Reader 2011, 317a-323. 1961a-1967, Kenya, Kenyaopithecus africanus and K. Wicker. Restless in his search for hominid missing links, Louis Leakey, 1961b, 1967, 1970, turned to specimens of K. africanus and K. Wickery from the Miocene site Fortran, Kenya, which he argued were closely related, if not ancestral to the human lineage. In addition to bolstering this assertion on the basis of non-great ape-like features, for example reduced upper canines, not very prognathic face, Leakey, 1968, claimed that Kenyapithecus had made stone tools. 1973–A 1975, Ethiopia and Tanzania, Australopithecus afarensis. Donald Johanson and colleagues, 1979, conceived their Pliocene species as being sufficiently primitive and ape-like to stand as the ancestor from which separate Australopith and Homo lineages diverged, thereby displacing A. africanus as the otherwise preferred common ancestor. 1989, Greece, Auranopithecus, Gracopithecus, macedoniensis. First known only from a partial mandible with a worn molar, the 1980s witnessed discovery of numerous upper and lower jaws, as well as a partial lower face of this markedly sexually dimorphic hominoid. Based on the larger sample, Louis de Bonis and colleagues, 1990, argued that this late Miocene hominoid was a better potential ancestor of hominids than other Miocene hominoids, for example Proconsul, Lufingpithecus, and Shavapithecus. 1992–A 1993, Ethiopia, Ardipithecus, Australopithecus, Ramidus. Tim White and Associates, 1994, 1995, maintained that this mid-Pliocene form may well be the long-sought link between the living humans and their African ape ancestors. 1994–A 1995, Spain, Homo ancestor. Joe's A tilde copyright Bermuda A tilde copyright Z de Castro and colleagues, 1997, argued that this lower Pleistocene hominid was the likely most recent common ancestor of Neanderthals and modern humans. 1996, Ethiopia, Australopithecus garhi Berhanas Faw and colleagues, 1999, suggested that this Pleistocene hominid is a descendant of A. afarensis and the ancestor of the Homo lineage. 1999, Kenya, Kenyanthropus platypus. Leakey et al. 2001, argued that this Middle Pliocene hominid, and not A. afarensis, was ancestral to Homo. 2000, Kenya, Orantuginensis. According to Bridget Sennett and colleagues, 2001, this late Miocene hominid was the ancestor of all others, the sidelining Ardipithecus and all Australopiths. 2001, Chad, Sahelanthropus chadensis. Michel Brunet et al. 2002, claimed that their Upper Miocene specimen was both a hominid and the ancestor of all hominids. 2008, South Africa, Australopithecus edible. Lee Berger and colleagues, 2010, presented this early Pleistocene species as a descendant of A. africanus and the ancestor of Homo. Page 5.